Hi everyone, welcome. We'll just wait a little while everybody files into the webinar room. We've got some terrific speakers today that will be giving you some tips and tricks on how to get employment here in Victoria. So welcome. So we can see the numbers increasing.
Welcome.
So as usual, as we go through this webinar, please feel free to post any questions that you have in the Q&A area and also in the chat. We will get to as many questions as we possibly can. I can't believe they've only given us 1 hour to talk about this topic. And those of you who know me and perhaps know Colette and know Brendan and know Adam, we could talk about this. We could do a whole day on this, I suspect. So just 1 hour is never enough, but we will get through it as much as we can. All right, so I think we're ready to go now. So welcome everyone and good morning and welcome to this webinar today where we'll be discussing employment opportunities as the economy heats up. My name's Dominic Saporito, you can call me Dom. I'm the founder of Outcome.Life, a business that was set up 5 years ago with the specific purpose of improving the employment outcomes for international students. We're here today on behalf of the good folk from Study Melbourne. Study Melbourne is part of the Victorian government and it actively looks out for the welfare of international students whilst they're studying here in Victoria. Study Melbourne provides a whole host of amazing services, all of which are free. So please check out their website for the events and services they offer. We'll be posting that in the chat throughout the webinar. Study Melbourne recently launched their Career Catalyst initiative. This initiative are a bunch of webinars and events with the aim of assisting international students to secure meaningful employment here in Victoria. This is just one of the Career Catalyst events, and we encourage you to look out for the other great content that can help you kickstart your career. Again, we'll put links to Career Catalyst in the chat. There's no doubt that COVID has been a tough period for everybody, but particularly for international students. Many of the jobs that international students usually do during their studies have simply disappeared. Casual jobs in hospitality, such as cafes, bars and restaurants, not only provided funds for students to survive, pay for rent, buy food, etc., but it was more important as it became part of their social connectedness. A simple job like making coffee in a cafe can help students with their English, make new friends, and often leads to building professional network, which we all know is the best way to get a job here in Australia. And while some of these jobs are returning, signs are that this is happening much slower than expected, with many of the jobs not returning to the CBD as quickly as the suburbs and regional areas. And with many of the jobs changing perhaps forever as we get into this new normal. So what can internationals do about it? Well, here we have 3 exciting speakers to talk about this. The first is Adam Crowe, founder of Gator Technology and an expert in software and hardware engineering, as well as AI, automation, and the latest and greatest in IT technology. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Dom.
We have Colette Burke, who until recently was the most senior engineer in the Victorian government and advises many businesses on the future trends in engineering. Welcome, Colette. And we have Brendan Brown, Chartered Accountant and Financial Advisor with Prime Financial Services. He specialises in assisting technology and innovation companies securing grants from government and investors. And welcome, Brendan.
Thanks, Dom.
So welcome all. As usual, to those attending, please post your questions you have in the Q&A and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. So there's no doubt there's been a fundamental change in the way business and consumers behave as a result of COVID, which will determine businesses' needs over the next few next few years. So Adam, let's start with you. What do you see as being the main effects COVID has had on the IT industry and how that affects employment?
Yes, it's had major effects in that it's forced so many IT workers to have to do remote working. Now, this may sound pretty obvious, but remote working isn't the same as it used to be, in that a lot of companies who do utilize IT workers who do work from home suddenly found themselves also looking at remote IT workers from overseas as well. And so the competition for IT people that can work remotely has suddenly exploded. So that means that being enforced remote working, not only will you get productivity increases, as many of us have found, and a lot of managers and employers were very reluctant to test out remote working because we weren't sure what would happen. Would it make people just sleep all day, sleep in, or watch TV or play Oculus Quest? We weren't sure. Well, what we've found, the hard data tells us that people actually work more. They love their job, especially in the IT industry, and they did more of it. Less time traveling meant more time actually working, and people set up their work environments so it was a lot more convenient for them to also dabble after hours as well. It forced them to adhere to meeting schedules far better. It also, again, I talked about competition. It meant that you had to also start marketing yourself via the IT websites and services out there. So that meant that you had to be able to perform remote work using tools that you yourself already own. Businesses hate paying licenses. Okay, it just adds extra administrative overhead as well as costs. So we started looking at a lot of developers who knew open source technologies, okay, and used open source languages and could run the systems that they were developing at home without needing extensive support. So those of you who adopted Microsoft tools, for example, really struggled, okay, because you just didn't have the proper tools or support at home for remote working. So web services exploded onto the scene even more so. We also found that most businesses, including ourselves, we want to do more remote work because it's allowed us to save a lot of effort with our own offices, management there. And again, it's allowing us to integrate remote workers from foreign countries as well as regional areas of Australia and obviously other cities. So it's just changed the whole nature of the scene for us as well.
And so therefore, Adam, during COVID, everyone was fearful of what might happen. And I know, speaking to other people, they were wondering, how is this going to work? Is productivity going to reduce? Is productivity going to go up? And surprise, surprise, productivity did go up. And this has been across the board, which I think it was something that no one really realised. So for international students out there, I think the message for that, not just in IT, but I'm pretty sure that Brendan and Colette are going to say the same thing, is that don't be surprised if your very first job is going to be a remote one. And of course, that opens you up to being able to work in other areas of Victoria, regional Victoria, other areas of Australia. So therefore, to me, this is a really positive thing as the economy starts heating up. So Adam, what about some of the technologies that, working remotely has enforced upon others? You mentioned open source, but specifically, what are some of the things that have been very popular, that have been taken up?
Obviously, video conferencing is the number one thing. All of a sudden, everyone who's attending a meeting now has an equal presence. A lot of us didn't quite realise just how overbearing some of us may have been in physical offices and physical meetings.
Really?
Depending on where you sat. So all of a sudden, everyone is right up there in the Zoom squares and Microsoft Teams and so forth. And it also makes it a little easier for some process-driven, say, managers to be able to pretty much just scan through, making sure everyone gets their equal time. It also allows us to record meetings. And so again, if you're unable to attend now, it's much easier for you to catch up on meetings. That never really happened before. Not many people actually recorded their physical meetings. Okay,
Yeah.
not many people put their questions into an auditable form, such as what our video conferencing tools now do. And it's also making a lot of software as a service products now definitely try to integrate video conferencing and such auditing tools into their own products. It's changed the emphasis of our working solutions now. It's great. We also find that remote working means that a lot of us now are a lot more dependent upon our remote tools, such as GitHub and so forth. And that's, of course, causing international students and other remote workers to start presenting themselves in a virtual manner. So rather than the old approach of having to go around meeting everyone, now you've got to personally do your own marketing. And the best way, yeah.
Yeah, so also too, that poses a few issues too. Like, for example, make sure you got a good computer. Like the old, PC with Microsoft or with Windows Home is not going to cut it anymore, I dare say. And the other one is make sure you've got a good internet connection. Because how many meetings have we been on where, if someone can't put their video on, they sound like they're talking underwater, all that stuff I think is really, really important, as well as those collaboration tools. So in IT though, what are the trends that are continuing that international students in IT in particular, need to be up with?
We definitely need to, I've got to look at my notes now. We definitely have to look at discipline. That's a big one that remote workers and international students have to look at. We're now looking at skill sets in the future that require a lot more personal discipline, okay, because we now have people working unsupervised. And so in the future, we're going to see a lot more work that is almost gig economy, okay, within institutions and organizations themselves. Okay, it's easier to audit and measure people's performance if everything is being done virtually.
And web, I think, that's just those who adopted web technologies early on, even before COVID, I think we're in a really good spot.
Correct. The other thing too about if people are unable to come to the office and physical things need to be done, all of a sudden robotics suddenly has to lift its game a great deal. And so we're going to see a lot more robotics, okay, as people can't get out there.
And I've been reading that, if the last 10 years was all about social, the next 10 years is all about automation. And I think that automation, AI, machine learning, all that type of thing is something that is going to be very, very prevalent in the future.
Indeed, absolutely.
Yep. You often talk, Adam, about swimming against the tide. And it's something that you actually say to your development team, which numbers about 13 these days. You talk about that all the time. What do you mean by that?
Essentially, history tends to, I guess, roll in like a massive tide. And a lot of technologies have a momentum which is very difficult to fight against. Open source was one of those trends that we started seeing a very long time ago, because those of us who indulged in it suddenly found it a lot more liberating, and from an industrial point of view, it was so much more cost effective. Okay, and that's only going to continue. Obviously, being able to work in AI, as well as the full extent of all the artificial intelligence subjects. But it's not just about deep learning, for example. There's a lot more things to do with rules and verification, validation type logic. Data science in many ways has to also come into this. So students who tend to work in those areas are going to find that the market is going to go in that direction. So you're surfing that, okay? It's a bit like a good investor, okay? They tend to invest in industries rather than specific companies. And that's what we look at. So try not to get too worked up into any particular specific say, company technology, but look at the general trends, general languages rather than one specific language. Look, mobile, for example, is continuing to boom. And also with I guess, IT spreading its way around the world globally, look at developing markets, okay? And certainly in Africa and so forth, we're seeing a lot more mobile usage, and that's going to grow even more. We're seeing even faster internet. We're seeing virtual reality. That's another thing, augmented reality. This is very exciting stuff.
Yep.
Technologies which probably aren't, sorry, Dom, technologies which probably aren't or are swimming against the tide may well be things like, say, some of the old Microsoft data analytics type tools where the licensing is killing it.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a few things there, and you know, what can we say to international students in IT to prepare themselves? You mentioned one, make sure you've got a GitHub account, especially if you're a developer. Really, really important. Two, and you talk about this all the time, subscribe to daily news portals. And one of your favorites?
Hacker News. Love it. From Y Combination, entrepreneurial group in the US. Hacker News, keep reading it every day, make it a routine, and you'll start picking up on IT trends before they become well known.
Yep, and you know, as a recruiter of 14 years, I could always tell someone probably more about what they don't know than what they do know. Like if you're a Java person and you've never heard of Quarkus at the moment, right? There's no way that we could ever employ you.
Exactly right. We also find that we don't really exactly trust resumes, and for many international students, it's hard for them to communicate verbally under pressure as to what they know and what they do. So for a lot of us, we look at their body of work, and that tells us far more about the person than they themselves can tell.
Yeah.
So make everything you can offer publicly, make it public, put it on GitHub, create a website that helps promote you, because this is what we want you to do for your work. Do it for yourself first.
And of course, you know, these work sites like Freelancer and Upwork, and I think there's Fiverr or something or other, really encourage students to put themselves on there, and whatever it is that their skill that they've got, put yourself out there at a cheap rate and do some work for someone that you can then show off. I think that's going to be really important. Awesome, thanks, thanks, Adam. So Colette, we'll have a chat with you now. So for those of you who don't know Colette, Colette was the inaugural Chief Engineer for the Victorian Government, and she's currently the Director and CEO of Exner Group and owner of GM and Caster Middle East, which you may talk about, and non-executive director of VicTrap and ARRB. You might have to explain to us what that is. But interesting, Colette, I hear that the big tunnelling machine on the Westgate project was named after you. Is that true?
Yes, it's the Colette boring machine. And I try to, you know, I laugh when they actually named it. And they said, "You sure you'd accept that?" And I'm going, "Yeah," but it's so funny to be named a boring machine. But I tell you, I am quite more exciting than that. But that was pretty awesome.
But, and before we get into it, I think it's quite inspiring, Colette, that you know, you were the highest engineer in the Victorian government. Tell us a little bit about that and what got you there.
So a civil engineer background, worked predominantly in the early part of my career in construction. My husband and I own an engineering consulting business, which we've run for, it's just coming up to its 22nd year now, which is pretty exciting. But worked for lots of major construction companies, but worked in very varied roles, such as, you know, whether it's site engineering, design management, in private companies, small companies, large companies, worked for government. And was pretty exciting to be, you know, announced as the first Victorian Chief Engineer for the state. But it's given me a really good insight into a lot that's developing, and it has in the last sort of 3 to 5 years, but it's even been accelerated with COVID last year. So,
wonderful. And so tell us what is happening in engineering, in particular in areas that students should be aware of.
What's happening is there's a lot of work, particularly in probably about 5 years ago, manufacturing started to get a new lift. And I think with the shutting down of car manufacturing, people actually invented themselves, and manufacturing's become a really big export. In fact, we're the largest exporters in Victoria, in Australia, of manufacturing products.
Wow.
But there's really good opportunities in some of that area, and people just don't realise how diverse some of that can be. So there's really quite big hubs of manufacturing, particularly at Dandenong and Broadmeadows, but a massive hub down at Geelong, and they're converting an entire industrial parks. And I think they're also doing one up at in Bendigo as well. So there's heaps of work happening in that sort of space, and it's very, some large and some small companies. Construction's been very high on the agenda for quite a while now, with the government currently, so for at least the last 3.5 years. And now with the boost after coming out of COVID, they were extremely busy last year. And people, I mirror what Adam says, we've all learnt to re-gear and work remotely. So if you didn't have to literally be on a construction site, you actually worked remotely. And in fact, today is day one back in our office of our engineering company.
Wow.
We haven't been here since last March, and we've managed to do all our work remotely. So
and so COVID, and I think it's similar with IT, has certainly changed the workplace, even in engineering consulting, in that, you've now moved into an office half the size that you had last year, and still many of your employees would actually prefer to stay home and work a couple of days a week rather than come in every day.
Yeah, so today is day one back in our office. The people are actually nominating what days they actually want to come in. So we're going to at least have a common day where we meet, and then people will, opt in or opt out of coming into the office, but they will actually still work full time. So there's lots of opportunities where you could actually work remotely, part-time or full-time. And particularly a lot of there's quite a bit of decentralisation particularly in engineering. So we're seeing that even the government, they're actually looking at decentralising some of the work, such as, WorkSafe, one of our the safety organisation for Victoria has moved down to Geelong. Vic Roads, that runs all the roads in Victoria, moved to Ballarat. We've got construction going on in a lot of regional areas, because there's actually a massive amount of work and opportunities in regional areas at the moment. And Senatex, the government's IT support, they're actually looking at decentralising as well. So it does create opportunities for people to work remotely, whether it's part-time or full-time, move out to some of these regional areas too, where there are just absolutely growing opportunities. Which I think is quite exciting, and people are finding what we all learnt last year through COVID in Victoria was we can upskill in technology, and we can find really smarter, more productive ways of working, and people can actually get jobs that are a bit more diverse and a bit more remote. So it's created more opportunities than problems.
Yeah, and it seems like, especially with all the investment the government is making in infrastructure, that construction industry appears to be where it's at. And a lot of that stuff is happening outside of Melbourne. So this would be music to the ears of many students who are looking to perhaps emigrate to this great country. Some of the regions, and I remember speaking to you yesterday, some of the regions that they should be looking at is Ballarat, Bendigo, the Mallee, Geelong, of course. An interesting one was Mildura. What's happening up in Mildura, which is, probably 6 hours from Melbourne?
There's a great amount of work in sort of the water area. There's also up at Bendigo, there's the defence, some of the defence contractors like Talus, which supply quite a lot of defence vehicles, helicopters and modified bulletproof vehicles, and they supply them not only to Australia but also to the US.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of construction in roads and upgrading roads as well. So it creates opportunities for not just manufacturing and construction, design work, but it's also the roles can be quite varied. So even within my company, we do lots of training, and we're doing virtual reality training, which is one of our favourite things that we do. So to look at how you actually ship out some of this training to remote areas to upskill people. But in our team, we've got subject matter experts in tunnel boring and construction and traffic management. We've got IT developers, we've got graphic designers, we've got accountants, we've got our commercial team, and our other side of our business is commercial claims on construction sites. So there's many diverse roles that I think that are coming out that which create great opportunities.
And as a first job, I think there's often a misconception with engineers that that an engineering role is very specific with what they've learned at university. But the actual reality is that there's a hell of a lot of admin in engineering. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, there is, and I think you have to be very multi-skilled. So, one of the things is looking at how you upskill. So I did programming, so I had to learn Microsoft programming and Primavera. So I did that for about 3 years. I've done commercial management, so I went and did a commercial management course, a master's in commercial management. Learning skills such as we've all upskilled on IT, and I've done Zoom, web. I can't tell you the amount of meeting different platforms that I've done. There's admin, there's writing, we've got content writers. So there's lots of different areas that it's worth looking at how you upskill or micro skill in some of these, because that can actually add value to an employer if you go out there. And I've got one of my sons is doing engineering at the moment, and we've got a bit of a competition going. So we're seeing how many online courses we can do. So I'm doing a free one from Stanford University on digital transformation, and he's doing a free one on thermodynamics at RMIT. So there's a lot of stuff you can tap into that's free that you can access and do in your own time.
And that goes to our point that we say to international students all the time, and that is that you've got to have many strings to your bow. You've got to be able to have multiple value that you can deliver to an organisation. And so, Colette, you were saying, I think you said content writers. You value those type of people. But now anything in digital, would be, and given that every single graduate role gets hundreds and hundreds of applications, the way to differentiate yourself is perhaps to upskill yourself in some of these courses. And so, yeah. And so what would be some of the ones that you would value very highly?
Definitely like having skills in Excel, Google Sheets, Microsoft Project, having a bit of an understanding of digital engineering, even though it's still in quite early days, but it's going to be a very big emerging field. And we've just, in my role, we implemented the Victorian Digital Asset Strategy, which is about digital engineering on all projects and through the supply chain. And they got funding of 12 million out of the federal government to now implement that right throughout government. So it's going to become a really expanding area, but we need lots of, it's a skill that everyone will develop. And I certainly didn't have that skill coming out of university, but it's something you can learn about and develop as you go along. Yeah. And they're going to look at people in that space that have the interest in that. So that digital technology.
Yeah, and Colette, I know that you're a big advocate of networking and how networks can deliver all the opportunities in your life. Tell us a little bit about that and what engineers that are currently head down, tail up, studying away at university. What should they be doing to build out their networks to help their careers?
So I think perfect time now that we're all connecting digitally. So LinkedIn is a very big one for professional network. Hooking with people like I think I've got, I can't even remember how many people on LinkedIn, but I'll hook in with anyone. And most people are prepared to spend time and chat with you or meet. We're not meeting as much at the moment, but and to sort of guide you or give you connections into other networks. So if there are ways that you can connect with people, events when we're able to get back out and meet and meet people from industry. And most people are prepared to actually spend time with you and help give you some advice or mentor you. So it's finding the best way to do that. And I think at the moment, technology's allowing everyone to do that quite easily.
Yeah, and I think that if students are not doing that and are perhaps just focusing on getting good marks at university, they're going to miss out, because it's all about who you know. And so really important.
And the internships things are very important things. So any sort of work that you can get in an internship. So we ran a program. We had about 21 interns through Victorian government in the space of about 2 years. So student engineers. But so see if you can try and hook in and see if there's an opportunity to work on an internship. There's lots of opportunities remotely, but even doing things like, we use quite a bit now Airtasker for some of the work we do at Exner at our company. So you can actually get on and build up skills in that area as well, which actually is something you can put on your resume to make you demonstrate your capability and you know, probably secure that job.
Fantastic. Thanks, Colette. And Brendan, last but not least, what's happening in accounting and finance, and the area that you really do specialise in, which you might want to talk about a little bit, about entrepreneurship and innovation?
Thanks, Dom. Look, I think I'd be lying if I said that the last sort of 10 months or so hasn't been challenging. It's been obviously challenging for all sorts of businesses, but just as a general theme, probably what we've seen in our business and I think the accounting and consulting profession in general is we have seen a fairly increased demand in our services, and sort of, I think, you know, our revenue's been up about 20%, and that's similar sort of stories I'm getting from a lot of other accounting firms.
Wow.
If we sort of look back, accounting firms generally work on a financial year basis, so leading up to 30 June 2020, we sort of judge ourselves generally about how we perform over the course of that financial year. So when COVID broke in March, initially it was quite stressful. We were unsure, how we would keep tracking through to 30 June, what would happen to our clients, would we be able to keep staff working and engaged. It was quite stressful, but it seemed to work itself out fairly quickly. We were fairly lucky because we've invested fairly heavily in our sort of culture, in our work practices, and our IT systems. So we've actually been using Zoom for, I think, a couple of years now. Not actively, but this did force us to become a lot better and smarter with it. We have remote working capabilities for several years. We've had a flexible work model for about several years. We were fairly early adopters in it. So, I'd sort of traditionally work from home a day a week. Sometimes things get in the way, but, I was sort of roughly familiar with how it all works. But then to take sort of 100 staff around Australia and then literally pretty much overnight start working remotely. It had a few challenges, but everything seemed to work and the IT systems worked. So we're very thankful for that. I have heard some sort of horror stories of other accounting firms that haven't really invested in that way, and they had to go out and spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on laptops, for example. Like they had all their staff set up in work with sort of PCs, and they didn't have laptops, so they had to invest literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in screens and all sorts of stuff. So we were fairly lucky. Just sort of while we're talking too, it's fairly general stuff, but even just occasionally you'd use Zoom, and I didn't even use the video functionality of it. So yeah, suddenly you're doing dozens of Zoom calls a week, and just small things like the way you present yourself on the screen, wearing a collar, having the lights all right. Like you can't see it here, but I have like a little lamp here that can all change different colors, setting on different colors a day, just to initially, we've got a fairly sort of anal managing director, and he pulled us up fairly promptly in the first few meetings. So we all adapted pretty quickly. So it's just how do you still remain professional in a virtual world was probably the initial challenges.
Yeah.
A lot of our competitors, you may have seen in the bigger firms, sort of slash staff and burn staff whole divisions pretty quickly when it all broke. But we were sort of fairly keen to not do that. We've obviously invested a lot into our staff, and we're very happy with our staff and all their technical know-how. So we didn't want to do that. So the worst that really happened is staff were forced to take some leave. A lot of those people had sort of significant leave balances accrued, so they were the first ones that we asked to take leave. But we still ran a full employment model, and we asked no one to really cut back their hours or their pay. So
well, in fact, from memory, I think you actually added a couple of staff members. I know that a couple of interns that we placed with you,
yeah.
You took on as full-time staff.
Yeah, so it all bedded down pretty quickly, as I said, and then within a few weeks we could see that we're going to hit our targets and everything. Our clients were screaming out for help. So yeah, we kept our staff on. We kept working through that. We actually found that the internship program was fantastic. We've obviously had several, probably close to a dozen interns through our office in the last few years, and it's been a very valuable part of our business, and we've recruited quite a few people through that. And having the internship where I could literally just shoot an email, have some candidates put in front of me, and then interview them quickly on Zoom, and then just some people, I think we put on 2 interns during COVID, sort of around the middle of the year. I think both of those people were employed within sort of literally 48 hours, and they were starting on the Monday sort of thing.
Yep.
So as you indicated before, some of the key things that were important was the fact that they did have, I think some of them we did actually sort of courier some laptops out to them if we had spare ones and stuff like that, but a lot of them did have the IT infrastructure at home. So that was quite simple for them to literally just get a few logins and they were off and running. The other thing, sort of through the interview process and all that sort of stuff, I was sort of talking about, perception in a virtual world. It was quite important too that I think a lot of those people had, a dedicated workspace at home. I know it's always hard when you're a student and stuff like that, but there's probably nothing worse than sort of logging into a call and then having someone sitting there, in a lounge room with 5 of their sort of flatmates and stuff like that. So, ideally, if they can have a dedicated work area and IT systems and that sort of stuff.
And how about, a lot of these students, they just don't have experience, but you can certainly tell a lot about a person that's gone out and like Colette was saying, upskill themselves. What's some of the things that you look for?
Look, I'm a fairly big advocate of obviously the softer skills, like just, within a few minutes, you can pretty much do a Zoom call and understand who I can generally get a fairly good feeling about who they are and as a person and whether you're going to be able to work with them. That's probably one of the key things, but when you're sifting through dozens or hundreds even of resumes, in order to even get onto that short list, the really things that you're looking for are sort of experience. Now, it's always hard to get experience if you've never sort of been an accountant or worked in an accounting firm, but look, things that I look at are, do they have experience using accounting packages? And it doesn't have to always be real world experience. It could be, the fact that they've done an online course, which can cost nothing to do a zero course, or, have they provided some accounting assistance to a local social group at university or something like that. So having some background about, the accounting sort of theory and what a balance sheet is and how it works and debits and credits, and then also having some aptitude using the accounting software would just place you streets ahead of other people that, they may have great grades, but they have no experience. And I'm not to say that they wouldn't be great employees, but sort of initially when, resources are a bit strapped internally and things are moving really fast, it's nice to have some people that you don't sort of have to train from the ground up and that they have proven that they have some experience.
And I'll pick up on that point you say about the interpersonal skills. We're big advocates that a way that students can prepare themselves for the workforce is to just attend events and go to webinars and talk to people to develop their conversation skills. Because, I've got many sayings, but one of my sayings is no one gets a job with a resume, you get the job in the interview. And if you can't articulate yourself in an interview and show that, you're the type of person that a company would like to work within their team, but also get along with their clients, you're going to miss out on jobs. And I think that, we talk about every hour that you spend studying, you should spend building your personal brand and building your interpersonal skills. And that comes into play. You've got quite a unique group of clients that you work with because you do the research and development and other grants for many innovative companies. How are they going? And what are you seeing out there?
Look, just as very sort of general sort of statement, initially there was some concern. A lot of our companies are fairly sort of early stage companies, or they don't have a lot of revenue. So they're generally sort of funded through investors or owners, but they're really trying to develop innovative new technologies. So a lot of them don't even have a product on the market yet. So, you know, if they didn't have adequate funding in place that would see them through, they could have been in a bit of trouble. So there was concern there. But a lot of our companies are quite well funded, and you know, the fact that they're not really generating a lot of revenue at this stage, you know, having COVID impact that really had no change. So as long as the companies were well funded and they had a good sort of development roadmap and they had investors behind them, we've just found that they've just knuckled down and just kept doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And obviously they need our assistance in obtaining government assistance through R&D tax incentives or other sort of new initiatives now to help fund those development activities. So we probably, touch wood, haven't seen a slowdown in that area.
Okay.
And we also do a lot of work, Dom, in the biotech space. So we've got a lot of really innovative clients that are funded through some of the you know, the medical research commercialization funds that a government have heavily invested into. So, you know, they've got really good funding, and a lot of those companies are also pivoted into COVID sort of 19 applications and stuff like that, and attracted quite a bit of attention. So look, those sort of companies have really, it hasn't been a huge change, and I think they will come out of this, you know, when the world changes, and they'll have some great new technologies, hopefully, that can be sort of commercialized, and they'll potentially have some, you know, some health applications that will solve obviously a fairly sort of pressing problem that we have around COVID at the moment.
Yeah, and we're really big on this, in that it's those companies that are scaling up, that perhaps have just created a product and putting it out to market. They're the ones that are growing exponentially. The bigger companies, you know, in times of fear, they scale back. But innovative companies that are scaling up, they're many of the companies that some of the students should be focusing. And what are your thoughts on perhaps, you know, going direct to some of these companies and saying, here I am, this is what I can do, can I help you?
Look, I think it's key, it's pivotal. Look, probably internally as a business, what we've done and a lot of our clients have done too is have a look at their overheads. So look, do we really need to pay car parks for partners that haven't been there for 9 months, or you know, do we really need all of this office space where people have sort of, we've run surveys and most of the staff have said they don't want to come back full time, and they'd rather just come back in a part-time capacity. A small percentage of our office, say 5%, have said, well, they're happy just to never come back and work home permanently. So when we're sort of looking at our sort of cost structure, recruitment costs are a huge number in there. So actually, we've had a mandate that probably for the last year or two, it was starting to happen before COVID, that, you know, we have got around it where needed, but we weren't allowed to liaise with recruitment consultants and pay recruitment costs. I'm not sure of how much the internationals know all about the recruitment industry, but, you know, the fees to recruit through a recruitment agent can be, you know, upwards of 10 to 20% of the first year salary. So it's a huge cost. So,
yeah,
you know, if we can come across people through other avenues, through using the intern program to find people, or through family and friend networks, or for people contacting us directly, you will get I think, a higher chance of getting employment through those avenues. So, look, I'd always recommend contacting clients direct, and you know, to your students' credit, I think I've had 3 or 4 people ping me on LinkedIn, subject to the invites going out the other day. So, you know, taking those proactive steps, I think, can place you streets ahead of the rest of the crowd.
Yeah, and just for all the listeners, we do actually have a webinar, and it's tomorrow, on LinkedIn and how you can get the most out of it. And there's some little tips and tricks that, you know, I think are invaluable when connecting with people on LinkedIn. So, for example, I mean, all of us here would welcome any international student connecting with us. However, if you don't send us a personal note with the connection invitation, we may ignore it. And I think yesterday, because I get inundated with connections, unless you've told me how we've met, I may not connect with you. So that's one little tip that you need. But if you sign up and come along to the webinar tomorrow, we can help as well. One other thing, just out of interest, and this is for the entrepreneurial students out there. An alternative to getting employment in Australia is, of course, to start your own business. And we run a pre-accelerator program specifically for internationals, and we help them out. But what have you seen has been investor sentiment at the moment in investing in startups and innovation, Brendan?
Initially, I thought it would all sort of die, but yeah, it hasn't slowed down, and it's probably what we've seen is certainly sort of in the biotech space. Obviously, the government's put a lot of money into these medical commercialization funds, so that there's a lot of capital in anything to do with healthcare or sort of the biotech life science sort of space. Look, I think angels and sort of owners have generally funded sort of tech and stuff like that in its early stages, and those guys are still around. I think a lot of money, people may have initially pulled money out of the stock market, and there's, even though the market's been fairly strong, I think there was a lot of concern around the volatility, so that they might be sitting on cash. There's not a lot of positive returns on cash at the moment. So I think, sort of savvy angel investors and people like that are still looking to invest into businesses where I think it has a sound business model. Post-COVID. We also do a lot of work with US companies too, and I've heard that the venture capital industry in the US, initially things were on hold, but that's just been going apparently booming for the last several months, and there's been a lot of big deals being done. And I think one of my US clients raised some crazy figure on the Nasdaq of $3 billion or something like that, or something like that. I know it was huge, like $50 million. Very easily. So, pre-COVID, they probably wouldn't have got a deal like that away. So I think, there's still a lot of money circulating around in the economy.
Fantastic. That's good. All right. Well, perhaps let's open it up for a few questions now. And thank you so much to each of you for your insights. Terrific. There's lots of other verticals such as marketing and so forth that we could have talked about. But I think the concepts that we spoke about are very generic across all the different areas that students are studying in. A few questions are coming through, and one from Neil asks, and Colette, you mentioned this before, what online platforms are best for courses in mechanical engineering?
Well, there are many online platforms, so we often use the Moodle platform, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of courses that have been advertised at sort of a upskilling, micro-skilling TAFE through the university. So certainly I've seen it with Monash and RMIT University here. Like I mentioned before, I'm doing one in Stanford. So I think if you do a bit of a search out there, you'll find that there are quite a lot of available free or very low-cost courses.
I think Udemy is a good one, and I did meant to say online courses, but I did say online platforms, so my apologies for that. That's why you would have mucked that up. But there's so many platforms out there. I'm scared to ask how much it would cost to do anything at Stanford, but I suppose there's places like that.
My course for digital transformation is free.
Really? With Stanford?
Really good. Yeah, it is quite. And Aidan's one at RMIT on thermodynamics is free.
Wow.
So there is stuff if you hunt around, and it also it might be an introduction to the next part of a course, but it's I think there's quite a lot of content out there. But you're right, Udemy, they have some really good stuff. And the other one was, if you're wanting to learn anything like Microsoft Project or Excel, we actually sell courses and deliver it to people. But you go onto YouTube and you can Google anything these days and learn it, I think.
Yeah. And Microsoft Project, the #1 project management tool on the planet by a mile. So, if you're an engineer and you're going to be working in projects, if you do not have at least a basic understanding of that program, you may miss out on lots of jobs. Adam, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, if you're doing a course too, I know Berkeley have some fantastic free AI courses and that. I'd also suggest to students that if you're going to choose a free online course, try to choose one with a prestigious name if you can. Okay, the universities have a reputation to protect, and the name often gets recognition too from employers.
Fantastic. There was a question that I think was answered online, but I'm just going to follow on from it, saying that about this issue of having experience to get a job. And Brendan, you touched on that before. I know that some of the students that you've taken, even from us, had no experience, but they did an internship. They've done work at home. They've put themselves on zero. So there are ways around being able to demonstrate that you have experience without actually having had a real job. Makes sense?
Yeah, ideally, yeah. I sort of indicated before, Don, when we're looking through, dozens of resumes, some experience can make you stand out for the crowd. Having said that, though, through the intern program, we have had various people that we've spoken to, and one of those was, we met this person, and they were looking to help us with some marketing, and they ended up sort of starting in the marketing, and that dried up within the first few weeks, and then they pivoted into the R&D tax. So, look, sometimes I think it comes down to how you present in that first interview, and how keen and interested you are.
Yeah.
And then how adaptable you are to learn things quickly.
So are you saying that even though the area that they first went into, even though that dried up, even though they were such a great person, that you just put them into another area?
Yeah, I think that was Emily that's on your
Yes.
some of your videos, but she was exceptional because she'd never done an R&D tax claim in her life. However, she went off and did all the research online after hours, and learn how to do everything. And she obviously didn't needed a bit of help for the first few, but within a few weeks to a month, she was absolutely up and flying. So
And a fantastic thing happened in the last month of her internship, and that was that her supervisor resigned.
So at that stage, we didn't have a role for her, unfortunately, but we were hoping to keep her on in some capacity. But a key staff member that was sort of supervisor in that area resigned, so it was a no-brainer to keep Emily on and take her on in a full-time capacity. So look, sometimes just being in the right place at the right time and having the right attitude. She didn't have any experience, but it can be great.
I might point out too that we look for proactive students too. And I talked about GitHub earlier, but one one person we hired actually did a lot of responses and answered a lot of questions on some of the IT forums. Now, they weren't experts, but they researched the questions and provided very good professional answers. And so they built up a wealth of these answers. It was great to see. We hired her.
Fantastic.
Sorry, Dom, I don't need to repeat it, but I'm sure it's common sense, but it's amazing how many times you interview people and you ask them about the organisation, and we've got a website and we're a public company, and they know nothing. So look, just to spend 10 minutes doing some research on the organisation and the person that you're speaking to, the ones that do that, like some people in the interview say, "Oh, Brendan, I see you're a partner specialised in this area and you work with these type of clients." And I can see from your LinkedIn that you've associated with this company, that's going to place you streets ahead of the person that hasn't even sort of done any background research at all on you.
And I think that answers perfectly. One of the questions was about the right questions to ask during networking conversations or interviews. And that's actually understanding, like doing a bit of research, finding out what interests you, and then having a conversation with someone is really important. And I think that's one of the key things that comes to mind. So I echo that.
Cool. And another question, which, I mean, I've got my answer to this, but I'll ask you, Brendan, because you're the expert. Can international students establish their own businesses here in Australia?
Look, I'd have to defer on that one. It'd probably come down to their visa, potentially some visa issues there. So subject to the visa being an issue, it's quite easy to obviously set up a company, and we assist many companies sort of, generally to commercialise the technology and an idea and raise capital. You'll need to set up a company in Australia. So that's certainly possible, subject to, it's not breaching any requirements around your visas, obviously.
Yeah, and so for most students, they are allowed with the visas, the experience that we've had. But also too, you can always, we call it a side hustle, and often the very first part of a business is just a side hustle that then turns into a business once you validate what you're doing. And of course, anyone can do that. You can just, get an ABN and away you go. There's another question saying, I'm a materials engineer at the moment, doing research and reports about existing materials under investigation. We've also got a few jobs. However, I'm not sure if I'm not doing anything I can access academically. What are your thoughts? Does that make sense to you, Colette?
Yeah, I think it's asking about accessing information and reports. And again, it comes back to, as we mentioned earlier, connecting in with, so most of the universities now will have find an expert, so connect in with some of the university experts and create a dialogue with some of those in the area you're interested in. And then it's, again, connecting in with people in industry that have that same sort of interest. So it can be a sort of a stepping process where, you know, you find out people that will lead you to other people, and I'm always happy to recommend someone onto another area, or someone that's an expert in an area if you've got an area of interest. So it's getting on with that networking again, and seeing, you know, what your area of interest is, and connecting in with people of like mind.
Fantastic. And Adam, there's a question here. How much demonstrated interpersonal skills help in landing your first role or internship in the cybersecurity field? I mean, we've, you know, in your company, you've hired many students that have had no experience, yet you still hired them. So what would you say about that?
Generally, if you can complete a university course, you've got some skills in communication. For us, it's all about getting results. We can tell, we can look at your body of work and get a picture on how you operate, right? It's very difficult to fake, say, several years of GitHub, I guess, posts and things like that. So for us, I tend to look around the person rather than ask them directly, okay? There are some bad apples in there who do lie, and they do spoil it for everyone else.
Yeah.
But generally, we can understand most people.
So in cybersecurity, which is obviously going to be a technical area, interpersonal skills, of course, are important. And you're saying that simply by completing a degree, you've obviously got some interpersonal skills, but really for you, it's about you know, demonstrating that they're proactive and they've done stuff. And you know, I think that is probably what most employers are looking for. If all you've done is your university studies and you haven't done anything outside of that, and, you know, you just played video games for the 3 years, good luck.
Yeah.
You're going to be behind the 8 ball.
I'll also say that a lot of these students who do join us are very young. And so within a year of working in an environment, their language and communication skills usually skyrocket too.
Yeah.
Okay, they're smart, they will pick it up.
Fantastic. And the last question, which is on there, which is good because we're just about out of time, although one has just come through. Networking on LinkedIn, hit and miss. That is correct. But if you join the LinkedIn session tomorrow, we will show you about this lovely young lady called Shashini, who did an internship. At the start of her internship, she had 14 connections on LinkedIn. She had over 500 at the start of her internship. At the end of the internship, she had over 500. And during COVID, was offered 6 jobs. In fact, 7. She was offered one after she accepted one of those jobs. So LinkedIn, it's a bit of a numbers game, but you can put the odds in your favor if you follow a few simple tips. So please enroll for that. I checked this morning, we have 19 in the session for tomorrow. And of course, we'd love to have many more. We do it online over an hour like this. Can PhD students apply for industry internships? Of course they can. Anyone can. And especially those who, you know, finding it a little bit difficult to land your very first job. Anyone can do an internship. And as you've heard from Brendan, and he's very typical of many of the companies that we deal with, you know, an internship really is a 12-week interview. And if you approach the internship as the day you start is the day you get the job, you've got 12 weeks to lose it. That's the approach. So that works really well. So that's about all we have time for. Thank you again so much, Adam, Colette, and Brendan. We really appreciate your thoughts. Once again, thank you, Study Melbourne, for putting on these events. Please go and check out all the other great events that Study Melbourne has put on as part of their Career Catalyst initiative. We've got courses on LinkedIn, interview skills. We have webinars like this every month. There's a whole plethora there. And you know, please connect with us make sure you send us a note on LinkedIn, otherwise we may not accept it. And we look forward to seeing you next time when we talk about jobs of the future. So the world's changed, you know, everything that's happening in the world. There was in my research for that webinar, there was a report that says of the top 100 jobs of the future, 53 don't even exist yet. So I think it's really important that everyone's aware of what's happening in the future and to get ready for it. So again, thanks everyone. Thanks Adam, Colette and Brendan, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks very much. See you later. Bye.